But I think the confusion here is a good stepping stone into my next slide, because we're going to start talking about some of the nitty-gritties of the tool and like what might make it break and things like that. And I'd love to also hear from folks if they have other insights to share, or if I say something that they go, wait a second, no, actually it's this. So let's just jump into it. There's a lot of things I want to just kind of throw out. So my goal here, you know, there's a lot of text here. I've got 3 of these slides, but my goal is to just put the ideas out, put them in your brains, so that when the issue pops up, you go, oh yeah, that's right. I remember Chad said something about whatever, and then you can come check out the video. So let's just kind of go over some of the details of Multistep. Multistep is its own license. So if you get the Apsona base license, you want to use Multistep Report, it's a second App Exchange listing. It'll be a second listing in your installed packages in setup. It's a second set of assigned licenses and installed packages. So don't get confused about being able to assign people to Multistep in the Apsona app. You will have to go to setup. It's its own package. One other small detail that I get a lot of support cases about is that there's actually a custom object for Multistep reports that a person needs to have access to if they're going to see Multisteps in Apsona. So if you're setting up a profile or a permission set, make sure that they have create, read, edit, delete access to the Apsona Multistep report object. This is specifically in like a profile. That's just a thing I want to throw out there. As a support person, I want to make sure I'm getting all those common issues talked about. This is something that I think we've kind of implied, but I like to say it more explicitly, that the first step of a Multistep report typically kind of creates the audience of what we're looking at. I don't have a, let's just do, I think this was one that I used on these calls. So when I do my first step, I'm looking for products that were purchased last year and were of a particular product name. And then when I start going down my other steps, I'm only going to get contacts that are related to accounts that have opportunities, that have products that were purchased last year that have this name. So I'm defining my overall audience by that first step. And I just want to call that out. It is true that I may have, 5 products in the first step and 100 contacts. So I am expanding the report technically at a row level, but those 100 contacts are still limited by the fact that they're being linked to products that have filters applied to them. So just remember that the first step is really key to kind of define your audience. And oftentimes, in fact, Rob and I, we were just talking about this the other day, it's like, sometimes it's hard to know where to start with these reports. Like, what object do I start on? And I think that's sometimes, that statement can sometimes help. It's like, okay, my first step's going to define kind of the furthest reach that I could get. So what object makes sense to put up there so that it's not going to miss anybody? And I just think it's important to note that, and the answer is always kind of like unique, but that concept I think is an important one. When it comes to standard single step reports, if I were to run a single step report on a contact object, I mentioned this in previous calls, I have access to every object above the contact, and I have access to every object below the contact. So I have access to the account above it, and I have access to the campaign members below it. So I get 3 levels of access, where my main object is in the middle. When it comes to multi-step, every step can only look up to the parent when it's grabbing fields. So if I'm on a contact step and I want to get fields, I cannot grab campaign member fields. I can only grab account fields. And that's because the intention is, if you need a child object, you're going to create a step for it and then link it. So that's just a small distinction as you're looking through the fields, like, oh, wait, I always can see campaign members, but I don't see them here. It's because you're in a multi-step. But the filter does allow you to filter on child objects. So my filtering, I can filter the contact list by whether they're in a particular campaign via the campaign member. So filtering still gives you access to child records. Just a small distinction that I think is helpful. I'm just going to keep spitting this stuff out. We talked a little bit about reports or report folders, so I'm going to skip over that one. You can save them in different folders. Admin users do retain access to all reports, so visibility, doesn't change for the admin. I haven't talked about calculated fields, so let's just talk about it but I'm not going to go into too much depth because it's its own beast. Let me get rid of this. So you can use calculated fields in multi-step. It's its own version of a step. So in single step reports, I can add a calculated field right to a step, and I could put the JavaScript right here, and it'll show up in my report. For multi-step, you have to make a step that's a calculation step. And then what you do is you would add one or more fields. So you can add multiple fields to a calculated field step. And then you can grab fields from previous steps and stick them into your JavaScript formula and do calculations on steps above you. You can't do calculations on steps below. And I probably should have spent a little bit more time on calculated fields. If you guys want me to do that next week, I can. I'm not very good at calculated fields personally, and they're JavaScript based, so they do require to know enough JavaScript to write them out. We have some articles about calculated fields in JavaScript, so I'll try to get those links maybe for next week. But I did want to.
We have a vote for that for next week.
Okay. I'll spend more time here then. Yeah, I should have put more thought into it for this call. So yeah, I'll address it more next week. And that'll give me some time to kind of prep some solid examples. But yeah, I just wanted to call out for today, at least, that it is its own step. You can add multiple fields, and there you have it. So yeah, I'll spend some time next week. Absolutely. Okay, let's go back to the list. Oh, if you don't mind putting the two links here, Rob.
I already did.
You're awesome. Thank you. Okay. So we did talk about linkages, and I just want to call out a few other details about linkages. As I mentioned before, IDs are best, or lookup fields. Some people have the 18-digit formula field on their objects to get away from the 15-digit Salesforce ID and expand it to the 18 digits, which is non-case sensitive, so that you can export it and reliably do VLOOKUPs and stuff in Excel. If that doesn't make sense to you, don't worry about it. But if it does make sense to you, 18-digit formulaic IDs will not be recognized in Apsona's multi-step report as true IDs. Yes, you can use them as linkages, but Apsona is going to consider them a non-ID linkage. So if you need the kind of the features that come with the true ID linkage, you'll want to make sure to use the actual fields that have the little link icon or the key icon. Okay, here's a couple things that I think are important, and they elude folks. So these kind of 3 steps here are kind of good summations that will get you out of some troubleshooting hot water. And I don't know, I think, yeah, I think Mary is on the call who was experiencing this, and it took me some time to get to this point. I had to work with our developer team. So when it comes to multiple linkages, if you start with a ID-based link, let's go back to our multi-step.
Is this Mary Roberts you're talking about, Chad?
So was it Mary Roberts that you were struggling with being able to do multiple linkages, and we figured out why you couldn't? If it wasn't Mary Roberts, it was a different Mary, and I apologize. Yes, that was Mary Roberts. Okay, great. Where is our...
Okay, Mary, I unmuted you because Mary also had a question. I think she's referring to the same thing, right, Mary?
Yeah, similar report. Yeah. I appreciate your feedback on the linkage trouble I had.
Yeah.
But the other thing earlier, you were talking about multiple linkages, and it is hard to kind of think of examples and stuff. But what I've found useful is if I have, let's say I have 2 steps and I hide each of those steps because I want if they're unrelated, completely different objects, and somebody could be in one and not the other, or they could be in both, but they're both contacts. So I might have a step that pulls one, I hide that one. I have a second step that pulls the other, I hide that one. And then finally, my third step is on the contact, and I want to say, oh, give me information about the contact where they're in both. So I would do a link from my third step to both step 1 and step 2. And that's a a common example where we do multiple linkages back. So
Got it.
that's just an example. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. So yeah, if you use an ID as a linkage, Apsona is smart enough to limit your next options just to IDs. And if you were to use a non-ID linkage, it's going to do the same thing. And if your data is such that it's like you don't have enough to even see results, it's going to be blank, and you might be confused as to why it's blank. So back to kind of the meat here. Whatever type of ID you start with, if you're going to try to use multiples, it has to be of the same type, and that's what these two represent. One other thing that is an important thing that's kind of hard to see sometimes is that if you are linking kind of like 3 chains up, I didn't prep a good example for this, but let's say that we have an account step and we see the account ID on the first step. We have a contact step that includes the account ID and it's linking back to the account via the account ID. And then I have a third step that wants to link to the contact step, the second step, by the account ID. You're not going to see that option because the account ID is already being used to link to the first step. So Apsona is going to force you to link that third step back to the first step because it would be duplicative to do otherwise. Sorry that I don't have a visual for that. That all came out as words. But the other way to say it here is if the linkage from step C to B is the same as the linkage from B to A, then you're going to have to link C straight to A. So Apsona is dynamic and smart enough to kind of like only give you the options that you should have. But these 3 bullet points I found are a really good way to kind of summarize a lot of the troubleshooting issues that pop up for linkages. You can use linkages in the negative to say it does not match, and I hadn't mentioned that yet. So you can see here, I have the opportunity to match the contact ID from this step to the contact ID from this step, or I can say, show me the contact roles who don't match the previous steps. You can get like an exclusionary list, which is another great way to use linkages to find all the outliers. And that is by using does not match. All right, where are we at with time? Oh,
We have 2 more questions here.
Okay, let's do those questions.
Okay, let me find Melissa. Hold on one second.
For one record.
Go ahead, Melissa.
Hey, Chad. So yeah, my question, I'm just going to read it from the Q&A, is about when you're in the filtering and you have the for one record, for all records, or for no records. Sometimes I see this option and sometimes I don't, even if it's on the same field. And I'm wondering what is there? There must be a trick.
Yeah,
see it.
I can start to answer, but I don't know if I have the answer you're looking for. But
and I'm happy to share as well. I do have it up.
Okay, I think we might hold that off for after the recording.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I don't have any sensitive info up, but yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
I will first say that when you get those options, it's going to always be due to the fact that you're looking down at a child record.
That's what it is. That's kind of what I thought. So if you're using the same object, you're not going to see it. But if you're using a different object that's downstream, then you do have that option. That makes sense. It makes perfect sense. You answered my question. Thank you.
Perfect. I wasn't sure if there was another layer to it, but yeah, to get any of these options, these are called quantified filters, otherwise known as like cross filters, I would say, in a Salesforce report. And yeah, you're not going to see these if you're querying on the object itself, only if you're querying a child.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
And we have one more question from Carolyn, and it's a development question. Do you think Apsona will be adding an undo command in report development? It would be really helpful to be able to save and run the report and then undo the change or keep it depending on the output. If this is already available, how is it done?
That's a great question. That's a great feature request. It is not currently available. And I think the closest I could get you to it would be a hack of like saving it as a different report, but I'm seeing lots of reactions that are telling me that people would love to see that. So yeah, I'll put it in the queue. We're going to really like intense phase of development on all fronts for Apsona, and so there's a lot of work that we're working on. And so, I wouldn't necessarily promise this anytime soon, but I think that's a great idea. One thing that I think I mentioned before that is coming soon-ish is there's certain things that have certain changes that you make within a step that if you go between steps without clicking save, it forgets that you made that change. I think it's like somewhere like there's range and sort things. If you change it and then go to the next step without saving, it forgets that. That's going to be going away soon. So you'll be able to more fluidly go between steps and then just save at the end and run the report, and all of it will be remembered. So that is coming. But I will definitely put into the development team's queue that people would love to see some sort of undo or kind of go backwards in time. Thank you for that.
And Lisa chimed in and said, I've run the report one way and then use the change filters button to play with the criteria without editing the report.
That's a great point to make. Thanks for bringing that up. And I hadn't talked about that yet. So as you've run a report, after you've run a report, you can mess with the filters. And with Multistep, it shows you all the filters for all the steps. So you can make a bunch of edits, hit change. It'll rerun the report without saving it as such, so that you can get a sense of what it would be. And then you could either go, okay, great, I just wanted to change it real quick to get a different view of something. Or if you go, okay, I want to keep that, then you would go back into edit and you can like make those filtered changes permanently to the steps. But that's a good point. Thank you for bringing it up.
And also want to throw out there that our gift processing team uses it immensely because they don't like to go in and edit a report, but they just need to run it for a particular batch number.
Gotcha.
So speaking from an AffiniQuest point of view, where we batch our gifts and we're looking for items in a specific group or with batch dates on a specific date, you can create the report however you want, and then just have your users use the change filters button instead of mucking around with your design.
Yeah, that's perfect. So you can just kind of use it as like an on-the-fly filter to use this. So you don't have to save the report as a bunch of different versions. You just use one report and let the users change the data as needed. Excellent. That's a great use case. Thank you.
Melissa's chiming in. It says, is the not matches choice in joins the same functionality as doing like minus or cross filter using without choice?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a good comparison. Yeah. So yeah, saying like I want to see everything that is without X. Yeah, I think that's essentially.
So if you have like your first step has a bunch of selections, and then your second step is like from a completely different object or a different table, and you say where it doesn't match, it would, okay.
Yes.
You touched on that about 10 minutes ago, and I said, aha.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to play around with that. I might dig in a little bit more on that and down the road, but that's great. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, you got it. Cool. I'm gonna keep cruising. I'd love to be able to have the next call be up for details that people want to focus on. So I'm just gonna try to get through these and get them on the recording. We talked about without, we talked about any of. I think I mentioned this before, but you can embed any report in Salesforce, whether it's multi-step or single step. And I'll just, we do have a URL that talks more about that, but I will also, excuse me, I'm messing up here. Wanted to go back here and say that visual force page and buttons is the place to do that. You can place tabular views of Apsona data with filters and such. You could embed that into a record page. You can take regular reports or multi-step reports, and you can either give them their own standalone page so people can just go to a URL that you've given them and use a report, or it could be embedded as a related list to an object, and then it will filter the report by that object. So so that you can, see the related records or whatever that are specific to that parent object using a multi-step report. So I just wanted to call that out. If people wanted to dive more into that aspect of it next week, we could do that too, and kind of go through the steps of embedding things. Okay, a couple more things here. You can move steps up or down. I did not exactly show that on purpose, but I did it earlier. But I can take this campaign member step, I can move it up. But you can see that it doesn't let you because this step depends on the previous step, so it can't be moved up. So as long as your linkages aren't messing with stuff, you can move stuff up and down. So sometimes I realize that my first step is not really the right object and it's one down below. So I'll take that other step and I'll move it up to the top. That gives me the audience I want. I change the linkages. So you can move steps up and down. You can, it is also helpful to remove linkages before you remove the field that linkage is using. It'll get you into an error issue. So if I'm using the opportunity account that matches contact account, and I go up to this first step and I remove this field, oh, it's actually telling me that I can't. I feel like I've had scenarios where I've successfully moved a field and then I've tried to run the report and it's like, you can't do this. There's a linkage that's broken. And I would have to like put the field in, remove the linkage. And then, so messages, remove linkages before removing the fields that they depend on. That'll get you out of some hot water. And we talked about saving steps as you go and that's going to be updated soon. You could update filters all at once by clicking update all filters. So I'm in the edit screen. So this is different than change filters, but I'm in the edit screen and I just want to like do a big, overview of all the filters and make changes in every step. I could do it all at once by clicking this update all filters box. We do have a scheduler add-on. A lot of folks need reports to be ran on a schedule and emailed to important recipients. We have a scheduler add-on that works for a multi-step report. So you could have a report run every day at a certain time, send it to a bunch of executives and not have to do it yourself. So if you want more information about that, we can give you more info on a scheduler add-on. I do believe that if you change an API name of a field that's being used in multi-step, I don't know, or maybe this is just for calculated fields, I'm not sure, but I think you might have a report that breaks if you change an API name. And the API name, for folks that aren't familiar with what I'm talking about, is if I go to a field, the label is what I see, but when I open up the field, there is an actual API name behind it. The system's name is often different than the label, and you can edit that in Salesforce. And if you do, I think that the report may not be able to catch up because it's already kind of documented the data in the JSON code of the file, and it's not gonna constantly go out and look into Salesforce and try to find updated names. And the last thing, users need access not only to objects and reports, but oh yes. So if you include a lookup, so I'm in contacts, I've got the contact account lookup field included. If my user that's running this report or building a report doesn't have access to the account object, they are going to potentially hit an error because they don't have permission to see the account. So even though this is a contact field right here, this is a field that I will see on the contact, because it's a lookup to a different object, I need that user to have access to that related object, because this is ultimately a window into that object, and Apsona can't give you access to that window if you don't have permissions. So you might hit a report of user access, and you'll want to make sure their profile has access to account, that their Apsona configuration has access to the account. So whatever configuration is assigned to their profile, go into it, make sure that you see account in here so that they can access it. That's a common case. People will say, I don't know why this person can't run this report. And I find out that it's a lookup field to an object that they don't have access to. So that's an important thing. Okay, whew, this was a long video, but it was a great juicy one with lots of questions. I appreciate it. I'm gonna stop recording. If there's any other questions that we want to talk about in the last 5 minutes.
There is one. Do users need an Apsona license to view and or run the embedded Apsona reports? And so I believe what the correct answer is if they need to see it because it's embedded, they do need the Apsona for Salesforce license and the multi-step reporting license. But if you would like to give them a view by going to the tab only, then you could do that with the restricted licenses that we have. Would you agree with that?
Yes. So if you have a lot of users that just need to see, just need to view reports, that's all.
Oop.
That are applicable, like if it's a multi-step report, multi-step, and the base package, then you can add on less expensive licenses for people to just view reports. But you do have to meet that threshold. So if you are just, have a few licenses, then yeah, people need the full license to be able to see embedded reports.
And Laura, I stuck a link in there to the information about restricted licenses so you could read through it.
Awesome.
Okay, I don't see any other questions and I don't see any in the chat.
Let us know what you'd love to see next week. And so far I've got calculated fields. We were thinking of talking a little bit more about kind of deciding on what object you start on. If we want to talk more about embedding, since we didn't spend much time on that, we can, but I'd love to hear your feedback. All righty. Thank you, everyone. See you next time.